If there was one thing I could tell my young single adult daughters about marriage, it would be this. Loving your husband is going to be the easiest thing you'll ever do, and loving your husband is going to be the hardest thing you will ever do. Amen? Learn to love well. A double amen, I heard over there. Yes, learn to love well. Single women, young women, whether God has marriage in your future or not, learn now to love well. Intentionally enter into the training of your heart for relationship. Now, to do that, we have to understand God's love and his language for love, which is a little difficult in our modern languages because our modern languages don't have the complexities of the Greek and Hebrew language. For instance, I love my husband. I also love a good hot fudge sundae. But not in the same way. And thankfully, the Hebrew and Greek language of the Bible is very specific and descriptive about the types of love we need to learn to be in relationship, especially when it comes to marriage. And today we're going to look at just one type of love we need to grow in for our marriage. It's obviously found in Titus 2. Today we're going to talk about friendship love. Now, single sisters, this is the kind of love you actually can practice right now in your friendships. So look at what I'm about to teach through the lens of your existing relationships. Titus 2 tells us that we are supposed to be training the younger women to love their husbands. And what kind of love is described in the book of Titus in chapter 2? Friendship love. Now, how do I know it's friendship love? Because I read the book. How does Nancy know it was friendship love? Because she studied the Greek language. And in the pages of Adorned, she writes this about the word that Paul uses in Titus 2. His language conveys the idea of being a friend to our husbands, being fond of them, acting affectionately toward them, treating them with our utmost devotion, enjoying them, finding pleasure in their company, liking them. Ladies, do you like your husbands? Does your husband know that you like him? That's what we want to talk about today, and I want to encourage you to grow with me in our friendship love for our husbands in two very specific ways. The very first way is this. I want you to grow in friendship with your husband practically. We need to show friendship love to our husband practically. Now, girls, we've got to work on this from their perspective, not our perspective. Playing with someone when it's how you like to play, that's not really fair. Think back to elementary school. Were you ever the girl who took her ball and went home because you didn't like the way your girlfriend wanted to play? Don't be that girl in marriage. Let's grow up together and let's learn to play in the way that they want to play. This has been no small lesson in my life as of late. And so I want to share with you how God has been stretching me and growing me to see how my husband likes to experience friendship. This summer, Bob and I were on our way to Michigan, where we would be visiting with Nancy and Robert. And on the way, we had a discussion. We were both communicating about some of the unmet needs in our relationship. And my husband said something like this. He was concerned that we didn't have any common interests. Now, before you're offended at what my husband said, girls, that is a guy who wants to be friends with his wife. And I sat there and I thought, what do you mean common interests? We have 3 beautiful children, a phenomenal daughter-in-law. We have not one pet, but 32 pets. Have I mentioned I live on a hobby farm and I love my turkey very much? We have several thriving ministries that God has helped us to build together. And we have Jesus. I mean, isn't that the common interest of all common interest? Incidentally, single sisters. This is the common interest that matters the most. Because if Jesus is your foundational common interest, not only will you survive the hard times, but you will thrive in the good times. Make him your first common interest. But as I sat there in the car trying to think about what was my husband really trying to say to me, I remembered that he had used a word that I kind of tried to ignore during this discussion. The word was football. But I'm a godly woman. And so I said to myself, well, Lord, if you speak to me and if you tell me that I need to start to watch football and enjoy football with my husband, I will be obedient. I was pretty sure God was going to have nothing to say on the matter. Then we got to Robert and Nancy's house, and there was a Chicago Cubs game happening at the time. I don't understand that, really. I don't understand why some of you just cheered. See, I'm not that girl. I don't do the sportsing thing very often. But Nancy kept talking about her Robert's beloved Chicago Cubs, and here's the thing, she seemed legitimately interested. What had happened to my Nancy? As far as I know, she didn't watch baseball before Robert. I felt it was probably the Lord nudging me, but I have to say I wasn't very obedient until I picked up the pages of Adorned to study for this speech. And there in the pages of the book, she encouraged, I'm pretty sure this sentence was written just for me, drop your to-do list and your honey-do list long enough to snuggle up and watch some football. The Lord speaks. I'm currently reading Football for Dummies. Incidentally, on the first page, it says that football is a game that two teams play, and at the end of 60 minutes, the ones with the most points wins. 60 minutes. 60 minutes, it had the nerve to tell me. See, I'm not that dumb, girls. But I have decided that from now on, I want all my massages to be scheduled in football minutes. I'm going to use this. Now, that's my current assignment from the Lord. I'm learning to love football, and I actually watched a game just a week ago and enjoyed it. Now, those are football fans cheering. Now, here's the thing, girls. That's my current assignment from the Lord in practical friendship love with my husband. What's yours? What's yours? Learn to play with your husband. Now, I'm sure some of you are sitting there and saying, she really thinks that learning to play football or watch football with her husband, I'll probably never play. She thinks that's a hard thing. She doesn't know what it's like to have to love a husband through a hard thing. And my husband and I actually crafted this message together. And though that's my current assignment from the Lord in loving my husband, it's not been the only one. And so I want to ask my husband, Bob, to come up here as he's helped me with this assignment. I'd like you to hear from his heart.
I want you to know that in that discussion, when the word football came up, ice dancing also came up as my love for my wife, so Olympic ice dancing. But here's the thing. I've been thinking about how Dana loves me well, partly because I got repeated text about her speaking on this topic, and she wanted to know if she loved me well. And so I finally responded to one and sat down and thought about it. What I wrote in my text was, it's not when you cook for me, write me notes, or even when you watch football with me, as cool as that is. Because people who don't love me will do those things. It's not when you say nice things about me, because people who hardly know me sometimes can say nice things, right? And it's not even when you pray for me, because people who detest me can pray for me. Dana loves me well when she does whatever it takes to push me towards the often lonely frontier of God's plan for my life. Dana loves me well when she does whatever it takes to point out my sin and let me take ownership of it. In our marriage, loving well means willing to take the scalpel and open a wound when the disease of sin and selfishness and pride lurks beneath. And loving well also means waiting patiently for the right time to start that cut. All that to say this: so often leaders leave the platforms letting you think the very best about them, allowing you to fill in the unknown parts of their lives like spaces on the path in Candyland. And I can tell you that we don't live on Gumdrop Mountain. We tend to live somewhere between the candy cane forest and the molasses swamp. We are both passionate, type A, intense personalities. We're also leaders who've been called to direct ministries who aren't always called in the same direction. So it stretches us to the core. Just this morning, I couldn't find my socks in the hotel room. I looked for them and I thought, how can I lose my socks in this hotel room? And there was a tiny moment when I thought to myself, my wife took those socks. And she put those socks somewhere in this hotel room. She's going to help me look for them. And I'm going to find them later, which never happens. She doesn't usually take my socks. And I never found them.